Ladies and gentlemen, fellow members, welcome to another in a series of conversations. 今日は特別に最近来られたばかりの新しくカナダ大使ご紹介させていただきたいんです。どうぞ大使カメラ向かって皆さんにご挨拶していただけますか。
はい、もちろんそうですね。皆さんもこんにちは。日本に戻ることができて大変幸いでございます。
Perfect. You see, when we usually introduce people who cooperate or participate as interviewees in these things, we normally start with the context. What does this person know about Japan and how can they bring expertise? In your case, it's going to take a fair bit longer, as your story is long and fairly rich. Tell us about your early days here in Japan and where did you come here?
Sure. Well, it's a long story. Mm-hmm. I was born in Kobe. My parents were missionaries. Mm-hmm. And shortly after that, and they'd moved here from China because of the ruckus going on in China. Mm-hmm. And shortly after that, we were moved to Hokkaido, and we lived in the city of Asahikawa, which is considered to be the coldest city, I believe, in Japan.
Wow.
But as a kid, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. During the occupation and all that sort of thing. So. For the average Japanese person, life was pretty tsurai time. However, as a child, it was a wonderful experience. So after 5 years, because we were by that point, I had four siblings. We moved back down to Kobe, and I went to Canadian Academy.
Wow.
The old Canadian Academy. My mother actually went to Canadian Academy when she was a girl. So there's a bit of a lineage there, and of course your children went there, and
to the new one.
To the new
where
one,
they had actually running water, apparently.
So I went to Canadian Academy to the age of 16, and then and then we were sent back to Canada. And at that point, I really thought that was the end of my relationship with Japan. It was a difficult adjustment back to Canada. And then after university, I went to Queen's University. I did an MPA there. Before that, I went to Trent University. And was expecting to carry on with life in Canada and join the Foreign Service.
But before that, you joined the private side. You worked for a while.
I had done after university. I had worked both in the private sector as a consultant as well as with the provincial government in New Brunswick.
Right, right.
But there was always a hankering for the international
and for Japan
world.
Too, right?
Well, at that point, I wasn't thinking about Japan. I was thinking about something to do with the work in the international realm.
Our former president and our very close friend, John Powell's now passed away, tried to get you to work at expos, and we were almost there to do that, right?
He did. In fact, I might have worked with you, Wilf, in Expo 75 in Okinawa.
Kind of embarrassing. It tells
but
our age.
It does tell you that there have been different times in my life Japan has intersected. Anyway, having joined the Foreign Service in 1982, I hate to give you the date, I was immediately sent over here because I was thought to have some connection with Japan. My Japanese at that point was really rusty. So I went to a language school, the U.S. State Department Language School. And then came here as a lowly second secretary, where we met for our first time, and I met many of the members of the Chamber of Commerce, the older boys at that time too.
Who are fondly watching today, you know.
And worked...
Mark Pitko and all the guys.
Worked in the public affairs area, and then was moved over to the commercial side of things. Then I came back in the 90s, again in the commercial section as a program manager. And then I was asked yet again to come back a few years later as Canada's Consul General in Osaka, where I was able to live in Kobe, my furusato, and to reconnect with some of my old friends who are still down there. And then to be able to come back up here as the minister, the #2 position in this embassy, was a real privilege. And then here I am back for my 5th iteration at this wonderful embassy.
And you've covered just about every job that there is in the embassy to do, from public affairs through all the various facets of trade, and you come back with a very rich background, and you hit the ground running.
I certainly hope that I have.
Oh, yes, you have.
But you know, we'll see. It's just the start. I've been here, what, 2.5 months. But you know, one of the things that one of my predecessors, Joseph Caron, said was, when he came back after a lapse of about, he was away I think 4 or 5 years, he said, I have to renew my acquaintance with this country, which I thought was unusual for a person of his lineage to say. But indeed, Japan's changed hugely in the 6 years that I've been away, and that's something that I do have to
Well, a lot of the people
understand.
that will be watching, a lot of our members will be watching this, both in the Kansai and elsewhere, are recently joined. So you'll have to acquaint yourself with them. But there's a lot of people who've been here most of the time, and I know you've been meeting them all the time where you've been here. Just prior to coming here, you were ambassador to Indonesia and to ASEAN, and that was a huge brief, both trade and in other ways. How does that, you're going to portable, some of those connections were about Japan. Japan's a great focus in of course, all of Asia. Would you be able to leverage the ASEAN experience for Canadians dealing with both Japanese and ASEAN interests?
I believe I will. We'll see. It's still early days for me. But just a word on ASEAN and Indonesia. That area is a very exciting area. And Canada is doing extremely well down there commercially. I went there at a time where there was great expectation with respect to doing more work with ASEAN and making greater commercial inroads into that country. And I was fortunate enough to be there at a period when, in fact, those two things happened. In the course of the 3 years I was in Indonesia, I was able to look at Japan from afar, from a different perspective than this simply bilateral perspective that I'd had up to that point. I was able to see how the ASEAN countries viewed and dealt with Japan. I was able to watch Japan interact with China from an ASEAN perspective.
Wow.
And all of that was terribly useful. I developed good friendships with Japanese diplomats down in the region, as well as the commercial side of things. So I think that I'm able to bring to the job that I have here a broader perspective on Japan and its aspirations, not just vis-a-vis Canada, but vis-a-vis the entire region.
Plus, while you were in Indonesia, you dealt with a number of files. Bombardier, that was a big file for you there, and BlackBerry.
BlackBerry, of course.
Now called BlackBerry, it used to be called RIM, Canadian, and Manulife.
Many of these major companies all over.
And you can tell I'm trying to list most of our major sponsors here.
Air Canada wasn't there, but we certainly hope that they will get an extra line down to Jakarta one
perfect. We have had a lot to do, just prior to you coming here, as a chamber in promoting the conclusion of an economic partnership agreement between Canada and Japan. We consider this, as business people, to be a part of our business future. I know that you've been involved in the file because on your previous incarnations here, it had been started and now it's finally going, and you're here at the embassy at a time when it's about to build. You must feel pretty good about that.
I feel very good about it, Wilf, and I'm hopeful that this time it'll work. The time is different from 2005, 2006, when we had a preempted effort at doing something similar. I think the times have changed. The TPP and so many other efforts to create regional as well as bilateral trade agreements has meant that Japan and Canada both have to look to their broader interests, and an EPA clearly is going to work to both Canada and Japan's greater interests.
We have a number of partnerships in this, in our part of it as private companies. Obviously, with the Chamber of Commerce in Canada, with the key support of the KDN, and we did the thing in November. We're going to do it again in April 25th in Toronto. We've started to attract to us, you know, pretty interested Japanese companies. But one of the important partnerships is learning through yourselves here at the embassy, helping us prepare with our colleagues at the HBA. So I want to thank you for all of that support. We look to working to this together, and who knows, maybe this time we'll conclude an agreement.
On that, may I just take a second to commend the work that the Chamber and you personally have committed over the last number of months to to bring together the business concerns as well as business interests with respect to the EPA, to highlight both sides in the symposium that you held here in Tokyo in November, as well as the one you're about to hold in April. I think in terms of generating consensus within business communities, within providing a venue for dialogue and discourse, a venue where information can be exchanged, terribly important, I think, in terms of getting the Canadian as well as the business, Japanese business communities to understand what the merits of an EPA are. So, congratulations.
Thank you. And it's a matter of continuing cooperation with all those parties, and in particular yourself. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, I look forward to working with you and all members of the Chamber for the next 3.5 years, if not longer.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.